What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Eric Wilson. Today, joined in person with my co-host, Colin Alcaves. Today, we're talking about Patrick Kane. There's been some rumors recently saying that Patrick Kane feels like he has unfinished business with the Rangers. You know, obviously, he had a little bit of a short stint with us a couple seasons ago, playing with an injured hip. Didn't really get to see his full potential with the Rangers. And ever since then, Kane has been quite a controversial topic. Seems like half the fans want to see him return, come back. The other half wants him to just go rot away somewhere else. But we're going to get right into today's episode, talking about whether or not the Rangers should look into bringing Patrick Kane back for a second stint. But before we do, make sure you guys like, subscribe, ring that bell so you don't miss notification. Leave your thoughts on a potential Kane reunion down in the comment section below. And lastly, be sure to follow us on all our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. But Colin, my friend, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm fantastic. It's good to have you here in person. Glad we could finally get the in-person episode done. I know you've done a couple with Tony. We got to get Will here at some point, so we got to get Will up to New York, and then Tony as well. Get the four-piece in person. But you know, I'm good. I'm excited to talk Rangers always. Obviously, I wish we were talking about what Game 6 would be looking like.
No, but if the Rangers were in the finals, it would have been over already.
True, very true. We would have handled business. So, but yeah, no. On to Patrick Kane. You want to start this or?
Yeah, I'm looking at his stats right here. He only played 19 games with the Rangers. 12 points, not that bad. Could have been better. I know in the playoffs we only had 7 games. Scored 6 points there, so he played well. I mean, obviously we know he didn't play as good as we wanted him to, but again, because he had the hip injury. So he is healthy. He had a pretty good bounce-back season with Detroit, 47 points in 50 games played. So it kind of seems like he's returned to form. My only problem with it is I don't really know if his skill set is what the Rangers need right now. You look back at this past playoffs, the series against the Panthers, put Patrick Kane in that lineup. I don't really see him being a difference maker against a physical, hard-hitting Florida team. But like, if the Rangers can get him on a cheap deal, which we'll talk about potential contracts at some point, I'd be happy about it, but only if the perfect deal comes its way. I think there are better options out there, but it's not something the Rangers should look away from. But how do you feel about this one?
You know, I'm not opposed to it. I know we've talked about Patrick Kane before. Obviously, the injury plays a big role. I watched an interview he did with Emily Kaplan, and he was saying how he was like scared almost. He was playing scared hockey, and you can't do that, especially at the top league in the world, being the NHL. You can't. He said he would go in for the puck, try not to get hit. He would get hit, and it would take him 4 minutes to kind of get back in there, 2-3 minutes to get back in the swing of things, just because his hip would be in so much pain. And I think if this past season shows anything, it's that after that surgery, he is in tip-top shape. 47 points in 50 games, 7 game-winning goals, a lot of clutch overtime goals. You know, Showtime was definitely back and in full swing in Detroit. He's coming off a 1-year, $2.75 million deal with the Red Wings. Not a bad deal. I can't imagine he's going to want a whole lot more just because he is nearing the end of his career. He's 35 years old, so he's not washed by any means. And I think that he would have provided a little bit of a boost for the Rangers. I know everybody's looking for a bigger, kind of more gritty guy to help with that first line, but that first line was completely invisible in that final round. I think a large part of that was just the fact that they were completely and utterly shut down, but Mika also had probably his worst series of the playoffs in that series there. So it was tough. He had no catalyst on that right wing. They're trying everybody, whether that be Wenberg, who was not brought over to do that role. Roslovic was a swing and a miss by Drury in a bargain hunting season. You know, they just didn't have a true right winger. They haven't had a true right winger since Pavel Buchnevich. So I think, you know, getting a full season of Patrick Kane and allowing him to really develop that chemistry, you know, it also gives you the flexibility to potentially put him back with Panarin. If that's what could happen, you can move Lafreniere, who's now taking that next step up, and you have a solid 1 and 2 right wing. But I also think he would just help to spark Zibanejad and Kreider and finally get that line going again, because it was a little off last season. I know Kreider put up good numbers, but Mika had his worst year in the last couple of years in terms of points per game and whatnot. So I think it would be very beneficial to have another playmaker on that line who will not only continue to set up Kreider while he scores his almost 40 goals per season, but also help set up Mika so he can get back to scoring goals like we know he can outside of just the penalty or power play.
I don't know. My only concern is, like, obviously Kreider and Zibanejad struggled. Zibanejad more than Kreider, to be completely fair. Like, what? Like, I don't know. Is Patrick Kane going to be the one who's going to solve their problems? Like, we've talked about a couple different options the Rangers can sign this off season. Talked about Tyler Bertuzzi, Tyler Toffoli, even Tarasenko we talked about a little bit. And I think, like, I agree, the Rangers need like a bigger, more physical forward to kind of balance out the play. You know, Kreider's has a very strong net front presence. Zibanejad likes to take his one-timers that have kind of fallen off a little bit. And sure, Patrick Kane, arguably one of the greatest playmakers of all time. So his skill set could match, getting the puck to Zibanejad for a one-time or even just shooting it on the net for a Kreider deflection. But I just still think, looking back at this last season, I just can't get over how bad the playoffs were for Mika and Kreider. Not as much Kreider, but especially Mika. And I don't know if Patrick Kane's the type of guy to fix that. So if we do go out and sign him and then the first line still doesn't click, I mean, like you said, there's always the option to put Lafreniere up there and then try out the Panarin Kane experiment again. But, that didn't really work the first time. The only other spot I could see for him is if Kakko does get traded, like we talked about in last episode, off that one-year deal. There are rumors that he's already been involved in trade talks, which would then leave the third line at Cooley, Hedl, and who else? Patrick Kane, if you sign him on a cheap deal, wouldn't be horrible to have on your third line. It's just, again, I think it's a very risky potential move for Drury, especially because it didn't work out the first time. What's going to be different this time? And maybe Laviolette will be the difference maker here. But again, I think if the deal's cheap enough, then it could be worth it. So I do want to talk about the contract. You brought it before. We're looking at right here. The deal he signed with the Detroit Red Wings is a one-year deal at $2.75 million. That's a very good deal. If the Rangers were to sign Patrick Kane, I wouldn't want it to be more than 1 or 2 years, and I wouldn't want to pay him more than like 2.5. Ideally 1 year, 2.5 million, just lock up Kane. Do not give him a no trade clause or anything, just in case he does underperform and the Rangers could look to move him at the deadline. But I don't know. People talk about Kane coming back to the Rangers. I know it's been a topic we've talked about like 4 or 5 times ever since he left, because how prevalent it is in the hockey world right now. And, we had the opportunity to sign him this year and extend him. We were told we didn't because we couldn't afford it, but 2.75, the Rangers could have afforded that. So something changed that made Kane not want to come back and go to Detroit instead. I don't know how true these rumors are that he feels like he has unfinished business with us, but if it is true, I'm sure he wouldn't mind taking a little bit of a pay cut to see if he can redeem himself in the eyes of Rangers fans. So to me, like I said a couple times now, if you can get him cheap, short term, yeah, you might as well give it a try. There's a couple different places you can put him, but if he's asking for money or term, stop the talk right there and go and get someone who's more affordable, and that would probably have a better impact on the team. But what are you thinking about contract-wise?
I mean, I'm thinking the same thing. I think if you can get a guy who, last year is a pretty good player, nearly a point per game, that's a bona fide right wing that we haven't had outside of Lafreniere on this team for a good chunk of time now. I say you do it. I think if you can get him for 2.5, like you're saying, I think he's fully healthy now. So while we might not have loved what he brought to the team last time, I keep saying it, and you gotta mention it. He was hurt. He has a familiarity with Laviolette because he coached the U.S. hockey team back in the day, so there is a little bit of familiarity there. And giving him a full training camp to kind of get acclimated, as opposed to tossing him in mid-season, that's the hard part when you're acquiring superstars at the deadline. Is unfortunately, it doesn't always pan out like you would hope, just because they don't get the full amount of time to really not only develop that chemistry, but learn the new systems and the new coaching styles and playing styles and what the new coach wants you to do. And I don't think Gallant properly utilized him whatsoever. I can shit on Gallant all day, but he was just not that good. So I think that he mishandled that whole situation. So I think you give a coach who has a brain, Patrick Kane, and he can take the offseason, work with him, allow him to get integrated with the team for real. Like it was him. We talk about how the Panarin and Kane project didn't work. It was their first time playing together in a good chunk of time. They were together for years, or they were apart for years, like a long time.
That's also true.
So it's hard to just pick up where you left off. If you get a little bit of time to get acclimated again, I think that it could work. And I think it's one of the better deals that you can get for a player who can still provide that positive of an impact, and it'll allow you to spend a little bit more on your defense. You get a guy like Patrick Kane, who I said is nearly a point per game, at a cap hit at 2.5, even 2.75. I'd do it again. I'd even go 3 at most. But you get a guy like that at that price point, where we're talking about spending big money on a guy at the right wing. There's not really anybody out there who I want to sign long term. You still have to take into consideration that you're going to have to sign Laf and Shesterkin long term. So you're living now, but you're not hurting yourself in the future by locking anybody up to an extremely long contract who's already at a poor age. And it also, like I said, allows you to go and get that Brett Pesce or that big defenseman, whoever you guys want. I know a lot of you said Zadorov, and I'm not opposed to having him. He's not a first line guy, but I put him on my third pair, no question. So, you know, I think it opens up your options a lot more for not only your depth pieces, your bottom six wingers, but also your top defensemen. You know, I think that it's important to really reload this defensive corps just after this last playoffs. I think we saw that was one of our weakest points, if not our weakest point.
No, it was. Jacob Trouba was the weakest point.
But it's important that we replace guys like Gustafsson and, you know, Lindgren, depending on if you want him to stay or go. You might need to replace him. Schneider needs a new deal. I don't think they're going to let him walk. I think obviously that they'd re-sign him. But it's everything. It's just a bunch of moving pieces right now. So it's about filling all the gaps. And I think signing Patrick Kane to the deal that we're talking about with the point production at the price point, I think it's a bargain. I think it's really good. And I can't see a reason not to.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of reasons why it could be an attractive deal to the Rangers. Obviously, Laviolette being the new head coach is a big one. The fact that he's healthy is another big one. And, you know, again, he's a superstar. It's Patrick Kane. So I know this is a bit of a controversial topic, you know, probably. I mean, I think we're in agreement. Like, if it's cheap enough, do it. But if not, kind of stay away. I'm sure a lot of you guys watching will agree with that. As we saw on the Fireside Rangers Instagram when we talked about this, a lot of people also said, hell no, like, don't even think about it. Like, get out of here with this thought. So
I can see the downside, you know what I mean? Like, I see what everybody's saying, but it's hard to find a bona fide first line winger at this price point. And I don't really love a ton of the options out there, nor do I want to sign them to long-term deals. And Kane isn't looking for a long-term deal. Probably won't get a long-term deal just because he's 35. At this point, he's just trying to win another cup. And he proved this year that he can contribute in a very positive way with the Red Wings, who weren't the best of teams. And he still was able to put up 47 and 15 points on the power play. So he can drive offense at 5-on-5. That's, 30? I can't do math right now. But there is positive point production on the outside of the power play, which I will reiterate with every single right wing prospect that we go over, just because the first line lived and died by the power play last year. And I think you take that away, Mika has probably less than 50 points, and that's just unacceptable.
No, Mika was a power play merchant, so is Kreider.
So you need guys who are going to help drive that 5-on-5 up, and I think Kane is the guy to do that. I think he comes in at a relatively cheap price point. I think there's positives and negatives to both sides. I'm trying to only look at the positive just because I don't love a lot of the options out there, and this guy is willing to be like, hey, I'll take your money for a year until, you know, maybe a more enticing option walks along, or if he does well, then you sign him to another year. Like we keep doing with Kakko, except for this guy's better.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, again, there are pros and cons to both sides of this argument. I know Tony is not here today, but he's very anti-Patrick Kane. I know if he were here, he'd be sitting here saying, go somewhere else, go a different route, try to find a younger guy who's more physical than an older, more finesse type of player like Kane. But we're curious to hear what side of the spectrum of this argument you guys are sitting on. Would you like to see the Rangers sign Patrick Kane to a short-term deal, or would you like to look at other options? But let us know down in the comment section below. If you guys did enjoy today's video, please make sure that you like, subscribe, and ring that bell to miss notification. Lastly, be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. But have a good one, and
let's go Rangers.